In the first video of my Bleach analysis series, we covered the first 70 chapters of the story. We spoke about how Kubo introduced us to several characters and different concepts, and in this second video we're going to go straight into the following arc, the Soul Society arc, as we pick up from where we left off, following Ichigo and his friends making their way over to the Soul Society in order to rescue their friend Rukia. The Soul Society arc is regarded as one of the best arcs within all of shonen anime and manga, and it is for this reason that I really want to take my time with this story arc and delve into its finer details, trying to understand why it is beloved by so many people. So for this reason, I'm going to be splitting up my Soul Society arc analysis into two videos. In this first part, we'll be covering everything from the start of this arc all the way up until Ichigo is reunited with Rukia after his battle with Kimpachi. So I'm incredibly excited to dive into this material because it features some of Kubo's best work. Let's see how he builds off of the conclusion of the Substitute Shinigami arc and delivers to us a fascinating opening act, which introduces us to a new cast of characters, an entirely new world, and how the characters he introduced during the last arc react to all of these changes. And lastly, how Kubo establishes stakes within this arc, which not only make you empathize and engage with the characters, but make you feel invested into the outcome of this story. So without further delay, let's begin my analysis of the first half of the Soul Society arc. Before the video begins, only 79% of the people who watch the content on my channel are subscribed. So if you enjoy these videos and want to continue seeing more, then definitely help to support me and my channel by subscribing and turning on the bell notifications. Thank you for your support, and now let's dive into the topic of this video. In the first half of my Soul Society arc analysis, we are covering material from chapters 71 to 116. These chapters are of course adapted into episodes 21 to 41 of the anime. A lot takes place within the first half of this arc. We have Ichigo and his friends taking part in several battles, including Ichigo's battle with Jidambo, Ikaku Madarame, Renji Abarai, and lastly Kimpachi Zaraki. In addition to this, we get to see the inner workings of the Serete, as we see the Gotei 13 respond and mobilize to the threat of intruders. And in addition to all of this chaos that is occurring within the Serete, we have a shocking revelation that one of the captains of the Gotei 13 has been brutally murdered and put on display for everybody to see. So I personally believe that each story arc of Bleach has a theme that it centers itself around. While the Substitute Shinigami arc dealt with the themes of death as well as this idea of having the power to protect the weak, the second story arc of Bleach centers itself around this theme of having the resolve to carry out your desire. The individual whose resolve is tested to its limits during this arc is of course our protagonist Ichigo, and in typical style of a shonen battle series, he is made to face off against progressively stronger opponents, which serve to ultimately challenge and test his resolve. During Ichigo's battle against Ikaku, the extent of his abilities are questioned by his opponent. During his rematch with Renji, his determination is put to the test, and lastly, his endurance and the true extent of his power is tested during his battle against Kimpachi Zaraki. Now before I analyze and dive into each of these three encounters, let's quickly familiarize ourselves with the events that take place during this story arc with a brief summary. After arriving in the Soul Society, Ichigo and his friends attempt to enter into the Serete, but their entry is blocked by the gatekeeper Jidambo, who guards the western gate of the Serete. He is one of 4 gatekeepers who are tasked with protecting the Serete from intruders. The gatekeepers of the Serete are considered to be exceptional Shinigami. Despite the threat that Jidambo poses, Ichigo confidently confronts him, as he reveals that he had successfully completed his training with Urahara with 5 days to spare, and during those 5 days he had been constantly battling against Urahara, honing and refining his skills, thus explaining why Ichigo is unnerved by the threat of this oversized Shinigami. These 5 days of training that Ichigo has with Urahara are not explicitly shown to us, but we do have a brief flashback to this period of time where Urahara had taught Ichigo an important lesson about resolve, but I'll cover that in a lot more detail when I go over his rematch against Renji. After Ichigo successfully destroys the axes of Jidambo and wins him over with his kind words, he and his friends are ultimately prevented from entering into the Serete by the arrival of Genichimaru. As a punishment for Jidambo assisting them, the captain easily cuts off his left arm and pushes Ichigo back out of the Serete. After having managed to survive their encounter with Genichimaru, they are left with no choice but to seek an alternative, unconventional entry method into the Serete. This comes in the form of Yoriichi's friend Kukaku Shiba. At the home of Kukaku Shiba, Ichigo and his friends learn to channel their spiritual power. They are required to create a stable barrier around themselves so that they can be successfully fired out of Kukakushiba's fireworks cannon. Meanwhile, in chapter 82, the captains of the Gotei 13 assemble as they question Genichimaru as to why he didn't kill Ichigo and the others when he had encountered them, resulting in some of the captains and even us as the audience being suspicious of Gin's true motives. Their meeting ends up being interrupted by the arrival of Ichigo and the others into the Serite. They have a rather chaotic aerial entry into the Serite, and because of this, it results in all of them being split up. Immediately after Ichigo lands into the Serite, he is confronted by Ikaku Madarame in chapter 85. After a bloodied and suspenseful battle, Ichigo ends up defeating Ikaku. However, before the conclusion of their battle, Ikaku warns Ichigo that if indeed Ichigo is the strongest amongst the invaders, then he should be fearful of his captain Kimpachi Zaraki, who will surely be out there hunting him down. After this battle, Ichigo rushes to the tower that Rukia is being held within, but before he can make it any further, he is reacquainted with the red-haired Renji Ibarai. He is determined to kill the individual who had stolen Rukia's powers, but Ichigo is equally as determined to take down anybody who stands in his way of rescuing Rukia. Now that Renji is within the Soul Society, there are no restrictions placed upon his powers, as he explains to Ichigo that during their first encounter he had been only using 1/5 of his full power. This is an intense back and forth battle, with initially Renji having the upper hand, but when Ichigo is made to remember his training with Urahara and what it means to have resolve when facing off against an opponent, the tide of battle quickly turns. Despite Ichigo knowing that there are several lieutenants and captains that stand in his way, it doesn't waver his resolve. Ichigo is going to rescue Rukia whatever the cost. During the Soul Society arc, a memorable aspect of his character is his resolve and determination. Ichigo has every reason to give up. The odds are overwhelmingly stacked against him. His opponents have decades and in some cases centuries worth of experience. From the previous arc, we are aware that Ichigo's desire to rescue Rukia is fueled by his feelings of guilt and responsibility. He feels responsible for everything that is happening to her. Unknowingly, it was him who had taken all of Rukia's powers, forcing her to reside within a Gigai until her powers had returned. It is because of Ichigo that she was away from the Soul Society for several months, and ultimately the reason why they had sent a search party out to look for her. During this battle against Renji, we learned about Renji's past with Rukia, how they had grown up together and studied together, and how after Rukia had been invited into the Kuchiki family, a distance had formed between the two of them. However, despite this distance, Renji still cares a great deal for Rukia, and it is for this reason that he overly exerts himself against Ichigo, and he expresses anger and his desire to kill the one who had taken Rukia's powers away from her, as he believes that it is because of that individual that Rukia is now going to be executed. Renji knows that he isn't strong enough to go against the Soul Society or to challenge his captain. For him, the execution of Rukia is an inevitability and it cannot be stopped, and the only way for him to let out his emotions and to exert his frustration is if he either kills or defeats Ichigo, while on the other hand, Ichigo opposes the law and order of the Soul Society. He goes up against a system that has been well established for over 1,000 years. Even a seasoned Shinigami like Renji Ibarai knows better than to oppose the well-established law and order of the Soul Society. Despite Renji's feelings for Rukia, he knows that his efforts to save her would be futile. The difference between the two of them is that Renji is aware of how overwhelmingly impossible of a task it is to rescue Rukia, while Ichigo, who is oblivious to the history and customs of the Soul Society, is pushing through every obstacle with even luck and a naive sense of blind optimism. He is later grounded by characters like Yoriichi, who put this task of rescuing Rukia into perspective for his character, but we'll talk about that during the later portions of this video, like how he is made to understand that he is throwing his life away by recklessly confronting captains of the Gotei 13 without even being aware of what the second release of a Zanpakuto is. But coming back to Ichigo's battle against Renji, it is an excellent test of his resolve. We know that Renji, similar to Uryu Ishida, is another rival turned friend. This change in his character occurs after Ichigo remembers how to battle without fear. After he reaffirms his will and cuts down Renji, we have a unpredictable turn of events. After remembering the history that he has shared with Rukia, he pleads with Ichigo to rescue her. The Soul Society is a world ruled on honor and pride, so for Renji requesting the help from an outsider, the very individual who had just defeated him, is a captivating display of humility on Renji's part. He admits to Ichigo that he is not strong enough to defeat his captain Byakuya Kuchiki, as he is the most prominent figure who stands in the way of stopping Rukia's execution. After learning that Renji had trained day in and day out in the pursuit of surpassing his captain, and his efforts ultimately amounting to nothing, Ichigo reassures Renji that he will rescue Rukia and he promises to defeat Byakuya. After this battle, while Ichigo's wounds are being healed by Hanataro, we have the shocking revelation that the captain of Squad 5, Sosuke Aizen, has been murdered. Obviously, the intruders of the Soul Society are assumed to be behind this. Not too long after this, Ichigo faces off against the inevitable, one one of the captains of the Gotei 13, as he encounters Kenpachi Zaraki, the very captain that Ikaku Madarame had warned Ichigo about. We quickly learn that Kimpachi is an individual who is addicted to the thrill of battle, and it is for this reason that he is obsessed with fighting strong opponents. Once again, Ichigo finds himself up against an unmovable obstacle in his path to rescue Rukia. Despite attacking him, he is unable to hurt Kimpachi, as it is made evident that Ichigo is not strong enough to be facing off against him, and this ultimately disappoints the captain. He appears to have defeated Ichigo after he stabs him through the chest with his Zanbakudo. He walks away from him as Ichigo once again finds himself in this situation. Similar to the prior arc where he was immobilized by Byakuya, Ichigo lays helplessly on the ground. After Ichigo begs for his blood to stop pouring out of his body, Zangetsu appears before him. After Ichigo speaks to the spirit of his Zanbakudo and proves that he is worthy enough to wield Zangetsu by facing off against Hollow Ichigo, he is then allowed to borrow the powers of Zangetsu while in battle. This results in him releasing an incredible amount of Reiatsu. Their battle resumes as Ichigo is able to hold his own against the captain. After proving that Ichigo is evenly matched against Kimpachi, he removes his eye patch as he affirms that he is going to kill Ichigo. This declaration by the captain does not move Ichigo, because now he is fighting alongside his Zanbakudo spirit. As long as he has Zangetsu supporting him, then there is no way that Ichigo would lose against an individual who doesn't even know the name of their own Zanbakudo. The battle between Ichigo and Kimpachi concludes in one final clash, which is a result of both of them unleashing all of their Reiatsu and charging towards each other. This final clash brings an end to their battle as it results in an evenly matched draw. During his battle against Kimpachi, Chad also encounters a captain of the Gotei 13. He ends up being easily defeated by Shunsuke Kyoraku. Before he is defeated, in chapter 106 we get to learn about Chad's past and the promise that he had made with Ichigo. After his battle against Kimpachi, Ichigo is helped by Yoriichi. Meanwhile, we learn that Ganju and Hanataro have just arrived at the tower where Rukia is being kept. However, after Ganju finally sees Rukia, we have a shocking revelation that she is the Shinigami who had killed his brother. In chapter 115, Rukia confirms to Ganju that she did indeed kill Kain Shiba. It is ironic that he was helping Ichigo go against the Soul Society in an attempt to rescue the very Shinigami who was responsible for killing his brother. Ganju confronting Rukia is interrupted by the sudden appearance of Byakuya's Reiatsu. He is approaching Rukia's location, aware that the intruders have made contact with her. In chapter 116, after Ichigo wakes up from having his wounds healed, he senses Byakuya's Reiatsu and quickly realizes that he is confronting Ganju and Hanataro. After realizing that his friends are in danger, he rushes off to their location, not heeding Yoriichi's warning. At the end of chapter 116, we see that Byakuya inflicts a fatal wound against Ganju, and before he can cut down Hanataro, Captain Ukitake arrives. But he isn't the only one to make a sudden appearance, as the chapter ends with the sudden arrival of Ichigo, as we finally have Ichigo reuniting with Rukia for the first time since the end of the Substitute Shinigami arc. In addition to this, he is once again confronting Byakuya Kuchiki, the very man who had taken Rukia back to the Soul Society, her older brother who is not opposed to her execution, and is in fact the largest and most formidable obstacle that stands in the way of Ichigo. This covers the story events that take place between chapters 71 to 116, forming the first half of the Soul Society arc. What I want to do now is to dive deeper into some key events that occur, the first of which is the introduction of the Gotei 13, which is this brand new cast of characters. These are the main antagonistic forces of this story arc that stand in the way of Ichigo and his friends from rescuing Rukia. The Gotei 13 comprises of 13 divisions, which each have their own specialities. All 13 divisions are led by Head Captain Yamamoto, and each division has its own captain and vice captain, who is referred to as a lieutenant. In chapter 81, the iconic and memorable captains of the Gotei 13 are finally introduced to us. We are shown this cast of powerful new characters. An individual who leads a division of the Gotei 13 is usually one of the most respected Shinigami within the Soul Society. They are individuals who have undergone extensive training and have mastered everything that there is to know about their own Zanbakudo, and it is for this reason that they can exert enormous power on the battlefield. Up until chapter 81, we have seen two captains demonstrate their incredible power. The first was of course Byakuya Kuchiki, who had easily subdued Ichigo during the Substitute Shinigami arc, and the second was of course Genichimaru, who at the start of the Soul Society arc was able to easily take out Jidambo and push back Ichigo and his friends and prevent them from entering into the Serete. The meeting that takes place place between the captains of the Gotei 13 is actually because of Genichimaru, as they question why he did not apprehend or kill the intruders of the Soul Society. Each of the captains of the Gotei 13 have a very distinctive character design, from Kimpachi's bandages around his waist, his eye patch and his spiky hair, Otozen's sunglasses and his distinctive scarf that he wears around his neck, even Komamura, who has his entire face covered. Some of them appear more intimidating than others, but there is one thing for certain: none of them should be underestimated. We get an insight into some of the personalities of the captains in chapter 82. We quickly learn that one of the captains appears to be missing from this meeting, and that is indeed Captain Ukitake. His excuse for not attending is that he is sick. We are introduced to his character at the end of the first half of the Soul Society arc, in chapter 116. Some of the personalities that are revealed to us in chapter 82 include the personality of Genichimaru. He appears to have this nonchalant facade, which appears to be covering a more sinister side to his character, as he brushes off everybody's concerns and asks if he is really that important for all of the captains to gather and have a meeting about. Another character we learn about is Kimpachi Zaraki. We learn about his intimidating demeanor when he cuts to the chase and questions Gin as to why he had confronted the intruders without permission, and in addition to this, he doesn't mix his words by directly asking why is it that Gin had let them get away, because it should have been easy for a captain of the Gotei 13 to kill 5 intruders. When Gin plays off Kimpachi's concerns and acts surprised that his attack did not kill any of the intruders, Mayuri intervenes. We already know Mayuri has one of the most unique and distinctive appearances out of all of the captains. This brief glimpse into his personality reveals an erratic character. He is just as intimidating as Kimpachi. He blatantly accuses Gin of purposely letting the intruders get away. Kimpachi ends up getting annoyed by Mayuri's interference and threatens to attack him if he doesn't stop asking questions, as he states that he is in charge of questioning Gin. Before the situation can escalate, the head captain intervenes, as we are introduced to the leader of this group of characters, somebody who appears to be more stern and intimidating than all of them combined. He scolds both Mayuri and Kimpachi. We get to the purpose of the meeting as he questions Gin why he had acted without orders, and why is it that he allowed the intruders to get away. The head captain wants an explanation from Gin. Gin responds by smiling and stating that he doesn't have an explanation. He was just careless and he has no excuse for his actions. But as we know, before the head captain has a chance to respond, the meeting is interrupted by an alarm that sounds, alerting everybody that intruders have entered into the Serite. Of course, we continue to see members of the Gotei 13 throughout this story arc, as we learn about Hitsugaya's relationship with Momo, and Momo's relationship with Captain Aizen. We also get to learn more about Shunsui's character through his interaction with Chad, but during the first half of the Soul Society arc, the captain that we are most acquainted with is of course Kimpachi Zaraki. Thanks to his battle against Ichigo, we learn a lot more about his character, including his motive for taking action, his sadistic personality, and his unquenchable desire for taking part in battle, which is comparable to the Saiyans from Dragon Ball. So I now want to talk about Ichigo's first real encounter during this arc, which of course is his battle against Ikaku, which takes place between chapters 85 to 89 of the manga. Ichigo starts off this battle by establishing the attitude that he has adopted during the invasion of the Soul Society. When Ikaku questions why he didn't run away from him, Ichigo states that it would be pointless to, because if Ikaku is stronger than Ichigo, then he would easily be able to catch up to him. But on the other hand, if Ikaku is weaker than him, then he will resolve to beat him. The way he responds here reveals that Ichigo has a very do-or-die attitude here. He knows that there is no going back. Regardless of his opponent, he has to face off against them. There is no running away. The battle between the two of them immediately begins as they unleash a barrage of attacks and counterattacks. After exchanging names with each other, Ikaku is glad that Ichigo's name begins with the same letter as his. He even goes as far as to suggest that the two of them should be friends, an offer that Ichigo quickly rejects. Ikaku comments on Ichigo's fighting style as he states that he is a novice and he doesn't look like a warrior. But despite all of this, his reaction time is incredible, and the way that he swings his Zanbakudo is powerful. And lastly, even when it comes to his movements, they are on par with Ikaku's. Clearly, looks can be deceiving, as he states that Ichigo cannot be dismissed as a novice. When Ikaku questions who had trained Ichigo, he reveals that he was trained for 10 days by none other than Kisuke Urahara. It is at that moment in chapter 87 that we get a glimpse of Urahara in his captain's attire, revealing his identity as a former captain of the Gotei 13. Ikaku behaves with a lot of honor and respect, especially when it comes to battle, and after learning that Ichigo was trained by Urahara, he immediately activates his Shikai, stating that it would be disrespectful to defeat Ichigo in any other way. He is successfully able to cut the entirety of Ichigo's forearm, but this doesn't waver Ichigo's resolve in the slightest. With a cut above his left eye, which is pouring blood, impairing his vision, and now this wound that he has sustained on his arm, Ichigo does not appear to be doing well. After he bandages his arm, he immediately attacks Ikaku once again, as he tells him that their battle is just getting started, as he hasn't even had an opportunity to show Ikaku what his own Zanpakuto can do yet. I love this cocky, overconfident side to Ichigo. He never gives in to the overwhelming odds during the story arc, and it always seems like he has something up his sleeve. Some of the battles that occur within the Soul Society arc are very reminiscent of Akira Kurosawa movies. The way that Kubo depicts these encounters with two characters clashing, and it is almost like a pause in time until we wait for the outcome of their clash. And this is exactly what happens during Ichigo's battle against Ikaku. Ichigo's overconfidence pays off, as he tells Ikaku that it is him who will not be able to hold his Zanpakuto anymore. He jumps into the air and cuts down Ikaku, as it appears that he releases a small Getsuga Tensho. This not only leaves a gaping wound across Ikaku's chest, it also breaks his Zanpakuto in two. Even after this, Ikaku refuses to give up. Ichigo tries to show some compassion as he tells him to put down his Zanpakuto. He knows that he has lost, but just as I had mentioned earlier, Ikaku has too much respect and honor when it comes to the battlefield. He isn't going to stop fighting until one of them is dead. He states that he is not a coward and he is not going to surrender to Ichigo, and neither will he escape death by running away. He charges towards Ichigo as he remembers his training with Urahara, and in comparison to Urahara, Ikaku is far too slow, which leads to him attacking one final time, taking out his opponent. In chapter 89, we see the aftermath of their battle. While Ikaku was passed out, it is revealed that Ichigo had healed him and had prevented him from dying. When Ichigo reveals to Ikaku that he wants to know where Rukia is because he wants to save her, he bursts out laughing at the prospect. It appears that Ikaku has some respect for Ichigo after battling him, and after learning that Ichigo had saved his life. Through this initial taster battle, we get a feel for Ichigo's abilities. Ikaku was clearly no match for him, but he was still strong enough to inflict some serious damage on Ichigo. And I also believe that this fight served to humanize the enemy that Ichigo is up against, as we learn that there are both good and bad Shinigami within the Soul Society, and Ichigo's first encounter just so happened to be against somebody who was understanding and was willing to help Ichigo and to point him in the direction of where Rukia is being held. Now, the next key event that I want to talk about is Ichigo's rematch against Renji. I did speak about this rematch earlier and how Renji has a change of heart and asks Ichigo for help after he is defeated by him. But now I want to dive into some of the details that are revealed about Renji's past with Rukia, explaining some key points about his character and how he was impacted after Rukia had joined the Kuchiki family. And it is because of this rematch, because of Ichigo's resolve, he is made to see sense. The fact is that Renji was too afraid to do anything to stop Rukia's execution. He had already given up before even trying. But this is exactly the opposite of Ichigo's attitude during this story arc. He is being driven by his resolve and his determination. With each encounter, he is continuously getting stronger, and it's not like Ichigo doesn't know how difficult this task is. He is constantly being reminded on his way there. Even moments ago, Ikaku had laughed in his face when he had suggested that he was going to rescue Rukia. He may have held his own against a third seat like Ikaku, and he may have been able to face off against a lieutenant, but the prospect of Ichigo facing off against a captain at this point in the story feels very daunting even for us as the reader. Renji comes to understand after the end of his rematch with Ichigo that he was bested by the better man. Ichigo's resolve and determination surpassed Renji's. We are aware that Renji isn't entirely cold and heartless towards Rukia. We are shown several scenes where he is visiting Rukia while she is imprisoned, and he is even shocked to learn about her execution at the end of the Substitute Shinigami arc. He even reassures her that Byakuya would possibly get this decision overturned, and to request for a lighter sentence. The bond between the two characters is further explained in chapter 98 after Renji is defeated by Ichigo. He has an opportunity to think back to his past with Rukia. We of course get to learn how he had befriended Rukia when he was just a child. They had grown up within the worst area of Rukongai, a small town which was populated with grown-ups who were either thieves or murderers, and the children that resided within that town were treated no better than stray dogs. They had dreamt of a better life, one where they are living within the Serete. Rukia and Renji were both spiritually gifted, so they were easily accepted into the Shinigami Academy. While studying there, they quickly rose up through the ranks. But one day, Rukia had been approached by the Kuchiki family. She was made an offer to join this noble clan, and it was at that moment that Rukia had entered into an entirely new world, leaving behind her childhood friend Renji. This distance that formed between the two of them was the result of a class divide that now exists. In addition to this, there is a significant power divide also, as Renji senses the the immense spiritual pressure emanating from Byakuya Kuchiki. It is so intense that Renji is unable to even look at him. Rukia was hesitant to accept the proposal, but Renji, who wants the best for her, encourages her. He puts up a facade and tells her to join the Kuchiki family. None of this is explicitly stated within this chapter, but you can tell from Rukia's reaction that she is saddened by Renji's response. She feels as though he doesn't care if he's going to lose her. Rukia abruptly ends that conversation and just says thanks and walks away from Renji. After walking away, you can see the sadness in Renji's eyes. This is because he knew that Rukia would finally have a real family. He had to let her go and not get in the way. This is what he had continuously told himself in this moment. The only way to win back Rukia is if Renji rose through the ranks and was able to surpass Byakuya Kuchiki. This is incredible character writing. And if you had seen Renji's first interaction with Rukia during the Substitute Shinigami arc, you probably wouldn't have been able to assume any of this. When he had arrived within the world of the living, he was incredibly cold towards her. We are aware that Renji worked incredibly hard to graduate from the Shinigami Academy, and he rose through the ranks within the Serete until he was able to become the lieutenant of the man that he dreams to surpass. At the end of chapter 98, all of this comes to light when Renji pleads with Ichigo, as he states that he has never been good enough to defeat Captain Kuchiki, and we get the confirmation that ever since Rukia had left him, he had trained day in and day out, but he isn't strong enough to save her. He pleads with Ichigo. He shamefully requests for him to save Rukia. In this moment, a respect forms between these two characters, and our opinion of Renji transforms from this detestable character to becoming one of the most likable characters drafted by Kubo, and this is all credited to Kubo's excellent character writing. Earlier on, I spoke about how Ichigo was fearful and reluctant during this battle against Renji. At the start of this encounter, when Renji appeared to have the upper hand, Ichigo was being soundly beaten. You can only imagine what must have been going through his mind. He was probably doubting himself, whether if he actually has what it takes to save Rukia. It isn't until he remembers the words of Urahara during their training together that he has a shift in his psyche. After remembering his will to fight, he combines it with his intense desire to save Rukia, and it is because of this Ichigo was able to finally cut down Renji. We know that Ichigo is taught and made to remember several lessons throughout his encounters in this portion of the story. His battle against Kimpachi made him go up against an individual who has no bond or relationship with his Zanpakuto, and it is through this encounter that Ichigo strengthens and even forms a stronger bond with his own Zanpakuto. We come to learn that the only thing that Ichigo knows about his Zanpakuto is its name. He knows nothing about how Zangetsu truly feels. Ichigo is dragged into his inner world when he begs for his body to stand back up. He is pleading for his wounds to stop bleeding. His desire to continue fighting manifests Zangetsu, and when he enters into his inner world, he encounters a inverted version of himself. The second time that Ichigo enters into his inner world, he is handed over a Asuchi, and he is made to go up against Hollow Ichigo, who is wielding Zangetsu. The purpose of this battle against Hollow Ichigo is to test him whether if he is worthy to wield Zangetsu or not. This inverted version of Ichigo demonstrates to him how to truly wield Zangetsu, as he utilizes the Zanpakuto like it is second nature to him. Hollow Ichigo scolds him for pursuing this desire to get stronger, while at the same time never making an effort to get to know his Zanpakuto. If you know about the true nature of Ichigo's Zanpakuto, then this is incredible foreshadowing. You have to think about why is it that he is hearing these words from Hollow Ichigo instead of Old Man Zangetsu. There is a lot of significance to this, and we only get further insight into this conversation during the 1000-year Blood War arc, which is still hundreds of chapters away. Once Ichigo understands that he was no different to Kenpachi, the very man who he had criticized for knowing nothing about his Zanpakuto, it is at that moment that Ichigo humbly requests for Zangetsu to fight alongside with him again. He wants another chance to understand him better, and it is at that moment that the roles are reversed and Ichigo is now holding Zangetsu, while Hollow Ichigo is now wielding the nameless Asuchi. After Ichigo leaves his inner world, an interesting conversation takes place between Hollow Ichigo and Old Man Zangetsu, as Hollow Ichigo tells him to train him well, because one day the power that Ichigo has will be his. This ominous warning foreshadows the events that will take place during Ichigo's battle against Byakuya, and even the problems that Ichigo has with his inner hollow during the Arrancar arc. Another point that I want to mention about the first half of the Soul Society arc is the relationship that Aizen has with his Lieutenant Momo. The anime does expand upon this a bit more during episode 46, as we learn about how Momo had idolized Aizen, and how she had dreamed of joining Aizen's division after her graduation. After becoming Aizen's lieutenant, you can see the close bond that she shared with the captain, and it is for this reason that she has a complete mental breakdown after learning that Aizen has been murdered. Prior to her learning about the death of Aizen, she was warned by Captain Hitsugaya to be careful about Genichimaru. Because of this warning, she immediately attacks Genichimaru when she discovers that Aizen has been killed, and it is at that moment that she is confronted by Gin's lieutenant Izuru Kira. The two lieutenants are about to engage in battle until they are interrupted by Captain Hitsugaya. Not too long long after this, we learned that Aizen had even left her a final letter. In this letter that Momo reads after the death of Aizen, it appears that her captain had been suspicious of Captain Hitsugaya, her childhood friend, and it is for this reason that Momo ends up confronting Hitsugaya. Captain Ginichimaru just so happens to be there also. Hitsugaya appears to be suspicious of the motives of Gin, while Momo, who is too caught up with what she had read within Aizen's letter, stops Hitsugaya from attacking Gin. This encounter occurs during the second half of the Soul Society arc, but I wanted to mention it here because I think it fits well with Momo's relationship with Aizen, and how her character was used for a big plot twist that occurs at the end of the Soul Society arc, but I'll talk more about that in my next video. The last thing that I want to speak about during this first half of the Soul Society arc is the emotions that Rukia is feeling while she is being detained. We are aware that she questions herself several times as to why people are shedding blood on her behalf, as she reveals that she has a very low sense of self-worth, and it appears that all of this is linked to this individual called Kain Shiba, the brother of Ganju, who we learned that Rukia had murdered. In chapter 94, we learn more about how Rukia was feeling during her confinement through the character of Hinataro, who had been working as a janitor in the prison. He had a lot of opportunity to speak to her, and he noted how she was often gloomy and sad. She even goes on to explain that she has a lot of faith in Ichigo, but she also mentions that she feels guilty, that it is because of her that Ichigo's life had changed and he had suffered greatly. We are aware that Rukia does smile when Renji tells her that there is a report that 5 intruders have invaded in the Soul Society, and one of them matches Ichigo's description. Renji notes that after Rukia had heard this news, she had smiled for the first time in a long while. At the end of chapter 116, we know that Rukia expresses anger towards Ichigo for attempting to rescue her, but Ichigo ignores her. His line of sight is fixated on Byakuya, and this of course brings us to the end of the material that we'll be analysing and discussing for the first half of the Soul Society arc analysis. We are left with a lot of unanswered questions and a significant cliffhanger, but now that we have talked about the break-in portion of the Soul Society arc, in my next video we'll be talking about the rescue that occurs. So there are several points that I've noted for us to look forward to in the second half of the Soul Society arc. We are going to finally catch up with Orihime and Uryu, and even get to see an intense battle that involves Uryu's character, as he finally faces off against a captain. We are also aware that something sinister is occurring, and it involves the character of Ginichimaru, and somehow he is tied into the death of Aizen. Hitsugaya is hot on his heels, and he knows that something is up. His driving motivation is that his childhood friend Momo Hinamori has gotten involved with the situation, and it is evident to him that she is being manipulated in some way, shape or form. Even after reading the first half of the Soul Society, you question what the true motives of Ginichimaru are. Who killed Aizen? Why was it that Gin allowed Ichigo and the others to survive? In addition to this, we have this cliffhanger where Ichigo has once again encountered Byakuya. Has he trained enough to reach a level where he can actually challenge Byakuya now? And what about this individual called Kain Shiba, Ganju's brother that Rukia had murdered? We will get the answer to all of these questions in my next video on the Soul Society arc. But until then, I want to know all of your thoughts on the first half of this arc. What do you think of all of this setup that occurs, and the character development that Ichigo undergoes through his various battles? Do you enjoy the first half of the Soul Society arc or the second half more? I'd love to read all of your thoughts, so definitely leave a comment under this video, and I cannot wait to see you in my next Bleach arc analysis video. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more like it, then please consider supporting my channel on Patreon. I have multiple tiers with rewards including access to an exclusive Discord server, video scripts, as well as being the first to know about unreleased upcoming videos. Thank you for your time, and whatever you choose to contribute I will appreciate, and it will mean a lot to me.